Someone asks you how your weekend was. It's a simple question, normal, polite, and you feel your throat tighten. Your mind goes blank, not because you don't know the answer, but because the question feels like a trap, like a test you're failing in real time. And while you're scrambling for something to say, something normal, something that doesn't make you sound weird, the other person is already moving on, already decided you're awkward, cold, unfriendly. But you're not unfriendly. You're not cold. You just can't do this. This thing that everyone else does effortlessly. This dance of meaningless words that somehow means everything socially. Small talk. And your inability to perform it has cost you jobs, friendships, romantic possibilities. People think you don't care. People think you're arrogant. People think something is wrong with you, and maybe you've started to believe them. Maybe you've spent years trying to fix yourself, practicing conversations in your head, forcing yourself to ask about the weather, about weekend plans, about nothing that matters. And it never gets easier, it only gets more exhausting, because you're not broken, you're just wired to communicate in a language that most people don't speak, and they punish you for it without even realizing. This video will explain why you can't small talk, not because you're socially anxious, not because you're introverted, but because of how your mind processes meaning, safety, and connection, and why that's not something you need to fix. If this resonates, subscribe. I make videos for people who think differently. Let's continue. Here's what nobody tells you about small talk. It's not about the content. It's never about the content. When someone says, "How was your weekend?" they don't actually want to know. When someone comments on the weather, they're not interested in meteorology. Small talk is a ritual, a performance, a social script that signals, "I am safe, you are safe." We are both playing by the rules. The sociologist Irving Goffman spent his career studying these performances he called presentation of self in everyday life. And what he discovered is that most social interaction is theatre. People are actors playing the role of normal person in casual setting. And small talk is the opening act. It's how you prove you're not a threat, how you demonstrate you understand the social game. When someone asks, "How are you?" the correct answer is not honest. The correct answer is "good, you." Even if you're falling apart, even if your life is chaos, the script demands a specific response, and then you ask them back, and they say, "good," even if they're lying too. And now, you've both performed the ritual, you've both proven you're safe to be around, you can move on to the next scene. But you can't do this, and it's not because you don't know the script, you know it. You've studied it, like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. You know you're supposed to ask about weekends and comment on weather and laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You know the steps. But every time you try to perform them, something in you resists. Something in you screams, "This is meaningless. This is fake. Why are we pretending?" And that resistance isn't a flaw. It's structural. It's about how your mind is organized. Let me explain. The psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan divided human experience into 3 registers: the symbolic, the imaginary, and the real. Most people live comfortably in the symbolic. The symbolic is the world of language, social rules, shared meanings. It's the agreed upon fiction that holds society together. Money is just paper, but we all pretend it has value. Politeness is just words, but we all pretend it means something. Small talk is pure symbolic. It's signs without substance. signifiers without signifieds, and most people are fine with that. They can swim in the symbolic without drowning. They can say words that don't mean anything and feel like they've communicated. But you can't, because you're oriented toward the real. The real, in Lacan's system, is what resists symbolization. It's raw experience, unmediated truth. The thing that can't be put into words but is more true than anything that can. When you're in a conversation and someone asks, "How are you?" you can't just say, "Fine," because your mind immediately goes to the real. How are you actually, existentially, emotionally, truthfully? And the answer is too complex, too raw, too real for small talk. So you freeze, because you can't lie smoothly enough, and you can't tell the truth appropriately. You're caught between two registers that don't communicate. This is why small talk feels physically painful to you. It's not social anxiety, it's ontological dissonance. You're being asked to operate in a register that your mind rejects as false, and everyone around you is swimming in that falseness comfortably. And they look at you like you're the problem, because you can't pretend as well as they can. But there's another layer, and this one is darker. This one has to do with safety, with what you learned as a child about what surfaces hide. If you grew up in a home where small talk existed, you probably learned to do it, because children learn through imitation. They watch parents navigate social situations. They see how adults greet neighbors, chat with cashiers, make meaningless but pleasant conversation. And they absorb it as, this is how you signal safety in the world. But if you grew up in a home where surfaces were dangerous, you learned something else. If your parent could be smiling one moment and screaming the next, you learned cheerfulness is a mask. If your family performed normalcy in public but chaos reigned at home, you learned small talk is a lie that hides violence. If you were punished for saying the wrong thing, even casually, you learned every word is a potential trap. And now, as an adult, when someone engages you in small talk, your nervous system doesn't register it as safe. It registers it as performance that hides true intention. Your body is scanning for the real message beneath the words. What do they actually want? What are they actually feeling? What am I supposed to do here? And while you're doing this deep threat assessment, the other person thinks you're just weird for not saying, "Yeah, weather's crazy, huh?" You can't small talk because small talk requires trust in surfaces. And you were trained not to trust surfaces. You were trained to look for the danger underneath. And now you can't turn that off. So every casual interaction becomes interrogation. Every "how's it going" becomes a puzzle you're trying to solve while the other person has already moved on. This is why you're exhausted after social events, not because you talked a lot, but because you were doing threat assessment the entire time while everyone else was just chatting. You were working, they were playing, and they go home refreshed, and you go home destroyed. And here's the cost. The social cost of not being able to small talk is enormous. Because our society uses small talk as a filter, as a test. People who can't small talk are labeled unfriendly, arrogant, socially incompetent, weird. And those labels follow you. They cost you jobs. You don't get hired because you didn't vibe in the interview, which means you didn't perform small talk convincingly. They cost you friendships. People don't invite you to things because you make it awkward, which means you don't lubricate social situations with meaningless chatter. They cost you romantic opportunities. People swipe left because your text responses are too earnest, too direct, too real. You're supposed to banter, to joke, to play the game, and you can't. So you're alone. Not because you don't want connection, but because you can't perform the ritual that unlocks connection. And the loneliest part is this: you watch people make friends effortlessly. You watch them laugh about nothing, bond over bullshit, and you think, why can't I do that? What's wrong with me? And the answer is, nothing is wrong with you. You're just trying to connect in a language they don't speak. You want depth, they want surface. You want truth, they want comfort. And our culture has decided their way is correct and your way is broken. So you learn to mask. You force yourself to smile, to ask the questions, to laugh at the jokes, to perform the script convincingly enough that people stop looking at you like you're strange. And it works. Sort of. People think you're normal now, but you're dying inside. Because every interaction is labor. Every conversation is translation. You're spending all your energy pretending to be someone you're not, so that people will tolerate your presence. And the cruelest part, even when you do it well, even when you successfully perform small talk, you don't get what you actually want. Because small talk doesn't lead to depth. It leads to more small talk. You master the script, and people like you more, but they don't know you more. They know the performance. And the real you is still alone. So, what do you do? If you can't small talk and society punishes you for it, what's the answer? Here's the truth. There is no answer that will make this easy. There's no technique that will suddenly make meaningless conversation feel meaningful. There's no therapy that will rewire you to enjoy talking about nothing. But there is recognition, and recognition is not nothing. Understanding why you can't small talk changes the experience of not being able to small talk. It stops being a personal failing and starts being a structural incompatibility. You're not broken, you're not defective, you're not missing some social chip that other people have. You're just organized differently. Your mind prioritizes truth over comfort, depth over surface, real over symbolic. And that comes with a cost. The cost is you will always struggle in casual social settings. You will always feel like an alien at parties. You will always have to work harder than other people to pass as normal. And that's not fair. But it's true. But it also comes with a gift. The gift is, when you do connect with someone, it's real. You don't have 1,000 shallow friendships. You have 3 deep ones. You don't charm everyone. You're invisible to most people and magnetic to a few. And those few are your people, the ones who also can't small talk, the ones who also want to skip the script and go straight to what's real. You will find them, usually in places where depth is allowed, in bookstores, in late-night conversations, in online spaces where people write long paragraphs instead of quick replies. They're out there. And when you meet them, you'll recognize each other immediately, because you'll both start talking and realize, oh, we're speaking the same language, finally. And maybe that's enough. Maybe you don't need to be good at small talk. Maybe you just need to stop hating yourself for not being good at it. Maybe you need to stop forcing yourself to be someone you're not, so that people who don't matter will like you. Maybe you need to accept that you're wired for depth in a world that runs on surface, and that's lonely. But it's also rare, and rare is valuable. You can't small talk, and you've spent your whole life thinking that's a problem. But what if it's not? What if it's just information? Information about what kind of connections you need, what kind of environments you thrive in, what kind of people are worth your energy. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and suddenly love talking about the weather. You're not going to magically enjoy parties where everyone is performing and no one is present. But you can stop pretending that's what you want. You can stop forcing yourself into spaces that require you to be someone else. You can start looking for the people who also hate small talk, who also want to skip to the part where you talk about what actually matters. They exist. I promise you, they exist. And they're looking for you too. They're also exhausted from pretending. They're also tired of conversations that go nowhere. They're also desperate for someone who will just say what they mean and mean what they say. So maybe the answer isn't learning to small talk. Maybe the answer is giving yourself permission to stop trying, to stop apologizing for wanting substance, to stop feeling guilty for not being able to pretend that meaningless words mean something. You can't small talk, and that's okay. It makes your life harder in some ways, but it makes your connections deeper. It makes your friendships real. It makes your relationships matter. And maybe that's worth the cost of being lonely in a room full of people who are only talking about nothing. You're not broken. You're just fluent in a language most people never learned. And that's isolating, but it's also true. And truth is what you've been looking for all along. If this made sense to you, you know why. Leave a comment if you want, or don't. Sometimes recognition is enough.